Hello and a very warm good morning. You're watching Newsline. I'm Shweta Kothari. We're bringing you stories from the world of business, policy and economy. To my left is my colleague Suyash Maheshwari. Suyash, very good morning. Sensex Nifty rising 2% in the last 1 week seem to be paring some of their gains this morning.
Yes, Shweta. So Indian markets are under pressure. Both Sensex and Nifty opened in the red today. Now Nifty was down about was opened below 20,150 mark, whereas Sensex was down over 200 points in the morning trade. Now this is on the back of weakness in Asian markets. Also, US markets closed in the negative on Friday, and this was about the second straight week where the US markets have closed in the negative territory. So Indian markets aping that trend and seeing some weakness in the morning trade. Now apart from Nifty and Sensex, if you look at the broader markets, they were also mixed. The Nifty small cap index was trading with some gains of about 0.3% up in the morning trade, whereas mid cap index was down about 0.1% in the morning. Also India VIX, the volatility index, saw a spike of about 3.27% this morning. Now the index is still below the level of 12, which indicates that the volatility is still below the average volatility of the last 30 days. Now one of the reasons, Shweta, for the spike of the volatility today could be that FOMC is due to come out with the outcome of its September policy meet later this week. So which would give us some cues as to what the FOMC is thinking and what the the interest rate path is going to be like. Now the expectation is that perhaps maybe not this time, they won't raise interest rates this time around, but when November rolls around, if the inflation pressure continues to persist, they might consider raising rates in the November FOMC meet. Now Bank of Japan and Bank of England will also come out with their September policy meet, so investors will perhaps adopt a wait and watch mode this week and take cues once the policy results come out.
All right, so all eyes will be on FOMC and the minutes of the meeting, as well as whether US Fed is going to perhaps increase rates, pause rate cycle. There is a consensus building amongst experts, analysts, economists that there could be a pause this time around. There could be a wait and watch and a hawkish stance perhaps on inflation. Let's get Mohit Gang, co-founder and CEO of Moneyfront, into the conversation. Mohit, thanks very much for taking time out. Thank you for joining us here this morning. I want to begin by asking you, what are you making of markets this morning? It is a mixed sort of start, flattish opening, but this after markets rallied throughout the week last week.
Oh yeah. Morning, Shweta. So look, I think one of the key indicators which I am tracking perhaps is the US 10-year yield, and that's shot past almost 4.4 levels, which is perhaps the highest in last 16 years, right? So I think the bond yields in US have been surging up, and that's perhaps indicating a rate hike in the US. And though we are not very sure, and this week will be extremely crucial on 3 or 4 fronts. I think globally, the FOMC and Bank of England, Bank of Japan, everyone is out to come out with their outlook, which is one of the key indicators globally. And in India also, I think, look, the special session of Parliament begins today. And I think the market is keeping one eye there in terms of what government announces. And it's an election year, let's be mindful of that. So government can definitely come out with something which can have a repercussion on the market, perhaps a large or some kind of a reservation or something, right? So I think that those are few key factors which one has to watch out for. My sense is this is a wait and watch week. There'll be a lot of events which will unfold. Plus, this is also the start of a festive season in the country. So the consumption demand will be tracked very closely from here on. Right. And I think those are few indicators one need to watch.
All right.
Now, Mohit, we have been talking about foreign institutional investors not participating in the rally. Rather, they have been net sellers, up to this point.
But
in September. We saw a trend reversal in the last 2 trading sessions where they have perhaps, at least have started buying Indian equities once again. So, is the time ripe for them to return to the markets, or perhaps they'll, continue waiting at least till the, monetary policy, FOMC's decision comes out?
Hi, Suyash. Look, I think FIs basically have been fairly unpredictable, right? I think the only predictable source of flows in the market has been the DII money, which has been consistent, constant, and perhaps kind of increasing month on month, right? So I would not pay so much of heed to the FI outflows. Yes, for last 1 or 2 months we've seen some outflows happening, but that's also more on the bank of US yields rising. And my sense is US policy action will be a key indicator to watch on the FI trend. But on the whole, I'm not too worried about this number right now.
All right, and a whole host of, I think, news items that perhaps markets will be waiting and watching out for. One of the important key events, of course, is the special session of the Parliament, which convenes today for the next 5 days. We'll get you all the updates here on Newsline. But let's quickly also move on to some of the stocks we are tracking this morning.
Yes, Shweta. So one of the stock of the day perhaps was Tata Steel. Now Tata Steel and the UK government have entered into one of the biggest deals in UK of the steel in the steel industry. Now Tata Steel and the UK government have announced an agreement to invest about $1.25 billion in the Port Tableau site, which will also include a grant of about 500 million pounds from the UK government. Now the project would bolster UK steel security, and it will be the first major step towards a decarbonization of the UK steel industry. Shweta.
All right, big news there coming in for Tata Steel, one of the largest investments that UK government will also make in Tata Steel perhaps?
Yes, so 500 million or something they'll get for investment from the UK government. Also, if you see at the stock, how the stock has been performing, it was up about 1% in the morning trade. So the returns have moderated slightly. It opened at about 135 levels, which is also the 52-week high for the stock. In the last 1 month or so, Shweta, the stock has gained about 15%. In the last 6 months, it is up about 24.6%. So, Mohit, what's your outlook on the Tata Steel stock?
The Tata Steel stock and perhaps the metal and steel pack,
which also has been rallying
for a while. Absolutely. Mohit?
Look, Shweta and Shwesh, honestly, we're not too much into these kind of metal stocks because these are fairly cyclical, and the demand and outlook of all these metals is very difficult to track, and what factors drive them is also very difficult to track. But specifically on Tata Steel, honestly, I think the UK subsidiary of Tata Steel contributes almost around 14 to 15% on the overall revenue. So it's a fairly large piece for them, and they have been struggling on that piece. I don't recall Tata Steel's reporting a PAT except for 2 years in FY18 and FY22. My sense is, but they've always been a loss-making. For as long as my memory jogs back, they've been a loss-making entity, right? So they have their own struggles. I think in this particular case, it's a win-win for both the UK government and the company itself. UK government is kind of giving subsidies of almost 5 billion pounds, right? So which is a 5 million pounds, sorry, which is a huge amount. And 1.5 billion is what Tata Steel will be pumping in. It also is, I think, making them energy efficient in a long way, and it's kind of neutralizing the carbon print or something. So it's a fairly good one. But I think the biggest boost for the UK government out there is that they're saving almost 5,000 jobs. Had this subsidiary being shut down, they would have lost almost 8,000 jobs, and I think 3,000 will still be cut off. But the biggest thing to be seen in this entire deal is how does the company negotiate with the trade unions. To be very honest, that's the most opaque piece right now, and which is yet to be sorted out. Rest everything else is fine, but the terms of the deal and the terms with the trade union will have to be closely monitored, and which will have a significant impact on how the company gets back to profitability out there. So they are in the management commentary, I think they are hoping that they will have almost like 150 to 200 pounds of profit per ton of steel production, which is a fairly high number, and which puts them in the top quartile of profitability amongst the steel companies. But again, the execution and the negotiation with the trade union and all those things will have to be monitored fairly closely. The stock is already trading at almost a 52-week high. My sense is for people with very high risk appetite and someone who understands the nitty-gritties of the steel industries and the cyclicality of the metals and thereof, can perhaps take a dab, but otherwise we'll stay away from these sectors.
All right, so that's the view on Tata Steel, but Bharat Electronics is also in news.
Yes, Shweta, Bharat Electronics, the stock was up about 3% in today's trade. Now, Bharat Electronics has bagged multiple orders worth 3,000 crore. Now the biggest order came from Cochin Shipyard of about 2,119 crores. Other than that, they have also bagged multiple contracts of about 886 crore. As a result, the stock has seen some buying interest. It was up about 3.24% at 9:45 a.m. this morning. In fact, Bharat Electronics has been one of the stocks that has been rallying for the past 4 or 5 months. Shweta, it is up about 40% in that time period. So again, Mohit, what's your outlook on the stock, especially given the fact that the stock has seen a significant run up in the recent months?
Oh, absolutely. I think defense stocks have been on fire. In fact, the entire PSU pack has been on fire, and there's no holding them back. To be very honest, across the board, you track any defense stock, whether it's BEL, HAL, the shipyard companies, everything has been literally up 30, 40, 50% in last 6 odd months, right? Look, I think the policy environment is extremely favorable. The noise around is extremely favorable. The Make in India theme has been working extremely strong for them. Government has been trying to localize the manufacturing of defense equipments to a large extent. The order books are extremely heavy. Just case in point being Bharat Electronics, where I think the next year order book is almost to the tune of 14,800 or 15,000 odd crores, which is massive with the kind of revenue numbers which they have been reporting year on year, right? And the growth on revenue and PAT both has been extremely healthy and extremely strong. Only concern in this pack, honestly, the story is extremely good. And with a fairly long-term view, given that the Make in India boost continues and everything continues the way it is, I think these are very strong franchises. But the only concern area, Shweta and Suyesh, is the valuation part. Look, to be very honest, getting it at a valuation of 8 times book right now on BEL. You require a heart of steel to do that, and in a frenzied market level, you have to honestly wait for good entry points. I'm not saying these are bad franchises; these are fantastic franchises for long term. But perhaps at a right price, this will make much more sense.
All right. So perhaps,
in fact, that has been a story with a lot of PSU stocks,
including HAL for that matter. HAL is also in news today. Is also up on the back of fresh contracts that it has received.
Yes. So Defence Acquisition Council has approved the procurement of 12 SU. 30 MKI aircraft as well as avionic upgradations for Dornier aircraft. As a result, we saw HAL rally about 1.6% in today's morning trade. And going back to the PSU stocks and the defense stocks.
Defense in particular, I think it's a very important, interesting story that is unfolding in India. There is a lot of positive sentiment about Make in India, but also procuring and self-reliance as far as defense equipment is concerned. And perhaps that could be the reason why, Mohit, all of these stocks have rallied almost 30 to 40% in the last 1 year.
And a lot of them have turned multi-baggers. So perhaps the fact that these orders coming in from the government will bolster their order book has already been priced in, or at least in the short term, can we see some more upside? Or what is your advice, Mohit, as far as defense stocks are concerned at this point in time?
Look, honestly, the orders are all pouring in. Every second day we get to hear the order books being jacked up because of some new order or something, and there is a lot of action and activity happening around in this area. Plus, we have to also understand India, the way it is geopolitically located and centered. It will always have huge defense requirements, right? So we recently heard of some lot of projects being announced on the India-China border area, so on and so forth. And plus, localizing of defense is a very strong theme, and government has been actively trying to pursue that. My only concern is the execution part of these orders. Historically, also we have seen huge order books for these companies. Though this time around, I think the signals are fairly strong, and they have been showing huge revenue growths and PAT growths year on year, all these companies, and they're also trying and expanding capacity. Plus, there is a lot of knowledge transfer which is happening from foreign partnerships and foreign MOUs which the government is signing to kind of boost the local R&D and the local manufacturing part of it. So yes, the story is different. It's just about the valuations and getting them at the right value. But then one can always argue and say that these are great franchises growing at great speeds, and you might not ever find that wishful right valuation valuation for these companies. So one has to just take a plunge someday. It's a leap of faith in my mind. Over a very long term, obviously these will be multi-bagger stories. These will produce great returns. And for the interim period of next 1 to 3 years, one has to be very, very patient. If the news flow continues to be extremely positive around, perhaps they'll continue to give some nominal returns, but expecting superlative returns from these levels, honestly, I think that's a little far-fetched conclusion right now.
Mohit, keeping it with the PSU space, any other theme that is looking attractive to you at this point in time? Because PSUs have been, the talk of the town,
Absolutely.
and a lot of these segments, sectors and themes have rallied. So anything that is looking, something that maybe investors can look at this point in time?
I think the theme has been played out for last 6 odd months and maybe a year if you were to go back and jog the memory. But I still think there is some juice left in the PSU banking space. That's one space which is a little undervalued, and time has perhaps comes to kind of re-rate them, not squarely at par with the private sector peers, but to some extent at a reasonable valuation as compared to what the private sector peers in this country are trading. Because look, the NPA story is extremely positive. The NPAs are down, the NIMs have been improving for these, and the loan growth is fairly stable, right? So I think the PSU banking space is something which is looking extremely attractive. One has to be very, very cognizant of what he's picking in out there. But the overall, as a pack, I think the pack still remains significantly undervalued as compared to the private sector banks in the country.
All right, and moving away from PSU to a startup, not so much as a startup anymore, but Zomato is also in news.
Yes, Shweta. So Zomato Slovakia, which is a step-down subsidiary of the company, has initiated the process of liquidation on September 14, which is expected to be completed within a span of 9 to 12 months. Now, the stock was up about 1.26%. In fact, the stock has been on a stellar run. In the last 6 months or so, the stock has given a return of about 94% on its way to becoming a multi-bagger. And in fact, the stock has been rallying ever since, the Q1 results, where for the very first time the company turned profitable on the books. So again,
that's been the story. But how upbeat are you on Zomato, Mohit, and upbeat on a lot of other startup as well as quick commerce story that is playing out on a national level here? Zomato, as my colleague Suyash said, turned profitable, but on the books, are the fundamentals looking strong for the company? How do you see Zomato turning out to be perhaps in the next 6 to 8 months?
Shweta, look, honestly, I'll be a little cautious of these kind of stories. Honestly, they have turned profitable, but we've also seen large block deals across all these names where the initial investors have taken an exit in this year, right? So I'd still wait and watch for a year to see if the profit story is for real and if they're actually showing growth in terms of per unit economics and profitability on the whole. My sense is they're still far away from sustainable profitability at the core business level. Though there have been some brokerage reports which have given huge valuations and huge thumbs up to Blinkit, which is also a part of the Zomato currently, and they're saying that if that gets listed separately, it will have XYZ valuation, right? So I think all those stories have been playing in for Zomato. I think fact of the matter was it got beaten down badly, and then obviously the company has, and in fact all the companies in these kind of spaces have focused intensely on turning profitable, because obviously the funding winter has dried, and once you get listed in the public space, then the matrices totally change, right? So I think it's good that the company and the management is totally focused on turning it around, and the story is out there to be seen, but still way off from the initial IPO levels. I think the IPO levels were around 140 or something, and got listed in a superb fashion. So initial investors are still hugely in losses. One has to understand that, right? And I think there is a long way ahead in terms of path to profitability on a sustainable basis. One-off profitability is, yes, fine, and it's greatly appreciated, and market, I think, has already rewarded the companies on that extent. Unless now it becomes a sustainable story, I think the next leg up is a tall order climb for the companies.
It will be a tall order climb, but can we expect at least Zomato to reach the the IPO price levels of about 140 by the end of financial year, Mohit?
Well, will investors be able to break even perhaps? Just take home the money they invested initially?
It's a very difficult thing for me to speculate or give you a number here, Suyash. To be very honest, I think markets are in such a frenzied mood that if the overall momentum in the market continues, you might see some crazy levels getting printed left, right, and center. But on a standalone basis, I continue to maintain the thesis that Zomato will have to prove that it has a sustainable path to profitability and not just a one-off year or something like that. My sense is 140 is still almost 40% up from here. That's a tall order. I think it'll take some while for the company to reach there.
All right, that's as tall as it gets.
As tall as it gets. And also Zomato, like as Mr. Mohit said, that they have to ensure that the profitability is sustainable. In fact, if you see, Shweta, in the last quarter or so, they have also introduced something called a platform fee of about 2 to 3 rupees, which will be charged with every order. So perhaps the focus has shifted to bolster that revenue, bolster that bottom line as well, and that will perhaps be the focus for Zomato and the investors of the company. Now, there was another stock, Shweta, which we have been talking about, Lemon Tree Hotels. Lemon Tree Hotels, the trigger is, the stock is up about 1%. The trigger is that it has opened another property in Bangalore. It is the 6th property of the company. The new property is called Peninsula Suites. Now the stock, Shweta, in the last 1 month or so has rallied about 20%. In the last 6 months, it is up about 60% or so. In fact, most hotel stocks have been rallying for the past couple of months, given that there will be a major push for demand, there will be a major increase in the demand for hotels, given that there are a slew of events lined up. First, it was the G20 summit. Now we have the World Cup coming up, and then we'll be also moving into the festive season, the wedding season. So, Mohit,
as the hospitality, Indian hospitality expands, perhaps it's good news for people in hotel business, Mohit?
Oh, totally. I think you go and check out the rate of hotels in Ahmedabad in the month of October around that India-Pakistan match. It's crazy. You'll not find anything out there, right? Honestly, the airfares, the hotels, the airports, they're all clogged, and Indians are traveling left, right, and center. I think it's long been homecoming. That's the real consumption story which is unfolding. To my mind, these are great secular trends, and I think anything pertaining to tourism is only bound to grow bigger and bigger and better in this country, because the kind of social media frenzy, kind of awareness which people are having towards travel these days, the kind of experiences people are going for, it's absolutely crazy. Everyone in the known group, and I think we don't need to go far ahead. Just around our friends and family circles, everyone has some plans, and those are all unique, different plans, right? So my sense is these are all secular trends. However, in that space itself, I would rather go with the market leaders. Honestly, look, I'm not so much of an expert when it comes to differentiating on the smaller names and how fast will they grow. Obviously, getting the 6th hotel will get them more number of keys. Bangalore is a great market. Obviously, it's a growing market. Lot of business travel which happens out there, and so it's absolutely fantastic, right? But I would still go with the market leaders in this pack if I have to pick one or two names. Those are the stories which, to my mind, are extremely sustainable, good long-term franchises, great names, great brands. People love traveling. It's like those dream hotels. Everyone would want to go and stay in a Taj or an Oberoi one day, and the names are all well known. Right, so those are aspirations, and which I think will continue to drive the Indians upward in terms of mobility.
All right. So the aspirational Indian story perhaps also likely to play up as far as hospitality and the hotel sector is concerned. We'll track all those details here. Mohit, thanks very much for joining in with your inputs this morning. We'll keep coming back to you. Suyash, thank you as well for joining in. Pleasure. We are given to understand Prime Minister Modi started speaking right outside the new parliament. Let's quickly dip into it.
नमस्कार साथियों, मून मिशन की सफलता, चंद्रयान 3, हमारा तिरंगा फहरा रहा है। शिव शक्ति पॉइंट नई प्रेरणा का केंद्र बना है। तिरंगा पॉइंट हमें गर्व से भर रहा है। पूरे विश्व में जब इस प्रकार की उपलब्धि होती है तो उसको आधुनिकता से, विज्ञान से, टेक्नोलॉजी से जोड़ करके देखा जाता है। और जब ये सामर्थ्य विश्व के सामने आता है तो भारत के लिए अनेक संभावना, अनेक अवसर हमारे दरवाजे पर आकर के खड़े हो जाते हैं। G20 की अभूतपूर्व सफलता, 60 से अधिक स्थानों पर विश्व भर के नेताओं का स्वागत, मंथन और ट्रू स्पिरिट में फेडरल स्ट्रक्चर का एक जीवंत अनुभव, भारत की विविधता, भारत की विशेषता। G20 अपने आप में हमारी विविधता का सेलिब्रेशन बन गया। और G20 में भारत इस बात के लिए हमेशा गर्व करेगा कि ग्लोबल साउथ की हम आवाज बने। अफ्रीकन यूनियन को स्थायी सदस्यता और G20 में सर्वसम्मति से डिक्लेरेशन, ये सारी बातें भारत के उज्जवल भविष्य के संकेत दे रही है। कल यशोभूमि, एक इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन सेंटर राष्ट्र को समर्पित हुआ। कल विश्वकर्मा जयंती थी। देश के विश्वकर्मा समुदाय को जो परंपरागत पारिवारिक हुनर है उसको ट्रेनिंग, आधुनिक टूल, आर्थिक प्रबंधन और नए सिरे से ये विश्वकर्मा सामर्थ्य भारत की विकास यात्रा को आगे बढ़ाने में कैसे अपनी भूमिका अदा करे। ऐसे अनेक, एक के बाद एक भारत के गौरव को बढ़ाने वाले, एक प्रकार से उत्सव का माहौल, उत्साह का माहौल, उमंग का माहौल और सारे देश में एक नया आत्मविश्वास हम सब अनुभव कर रहे हैं। उसी समय संसद का ये सत्र, इस पार्श्वभूमि में संसद का ये सत्र, ये सही है कि सत्र छोटा है, लेकिन समय के हिसाब से ये बहुत बड़ा है। ऐतिहासिक निर्णयों का एक सत्र है। ये सत्र की एक विशेषता ये तो है कि अब 75 साल की यात्रा हम नए मुकाम से आरंभ हो रही है। जिस मुकाम पर 75 साल की यात्रा की, वो अत्यंत प्रेरक पल, और अब नए स्थान पर उस यात्रा को आगे बढ़ाते समय नए संकल्प, नई ऊर्जा, नया विश्वास और समय सीमा में 2047 में इस देश को डेवलप कंट्री बना करके रहना है। इसके लिए आने वाले जितने भी निर्णय होने वाले हैं वो इस नए संसद भवन में होने वाले हैं और इसलिए अनेक प्रकार से महत्वपूर्ण ये सत्र है। मैं सभी आदरणीय सांसदों से आग्रह करता हूं कि छोटा सत्र है, ज्यादा से ज्यादा समय उनका मिले, उमंग और उत्साह के वातावरण में मिले। रोने धोने के लिए बहुत समय होता है, करते रहिए। जीवन में कुछ पल ऐसे भी होते हैं जो उमंग से भर देते हैं, विश्वास से भर देते हैं। मैं इस छोटे सत्र को उस रूप में देखता हूं। मैं आशा करता हूं कि पुरानी बुराइयों को छोड़ करके उत्तम से उत्तम अच्छाइयों को साथ लेकर के हम नए सदन में प्रवेश करेंगे और नए सदन में अच्छाइयों की मूल्य वृद्धि करने में कोई कमी नहीं रखेंगे। ये प्रण सभी सांसद हम लेकर के चलें, इसका ये महत्वपूर्ण पल है। कल गणेश चतुर्थी का पावन पर्व है। गणेश जी विघ्नहर्ता देवता माने जाते हैं। अब भारत की विकास यात्रा में कोई विघ्न नहीं रहेगा। निर्विघ्न रूप से सारे सपने, सारे संकल्प भारत परिपूर्ण करेगा और इसलिए गणेश चतुर्थी के दिन ये नव प्रस्थान नए भारत के सारे सपनों को चरितार्थ करने वाला बनेगा। इसलिए भी ये सत्र छोटा है लेकिन बहुत मूल्यवान है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
All right, that of course is Prime Minister Modi speaking right ahead of the short special session of the Parliament. Remember, the new session will commence at the new parliamentary building. And Prime Minister, of course, talking about all that has happened in the last 1 month, including India's moon mission, the G20 summit, and the launch of the Vishwakarma scheme. Joining me in the studio is Kartik Malhotra. Kartik, very good morning to you. Good to have you back. We missed you here.
Back here.
We missed you here on that couch. But let's begin with what's on the agenda. We know that the special session will start today. It's going to be a 5-day session. 8 bills are on the table. The timing of this is quite interesting.
It is interesting, Shweta, and it's also fairly secretive right now. You know, you don't just randomly hold new sessions in the parliament. And this is the new parliament building, and it's going to be the inaugural parliament session in that building. A short 5-day session. We have been made to understand that there could be about 7 to 8 bills on the table, but the details of those have not been disclosed, and even the opposition thus far does not know what to come prepared with for any debate on any bill. So it is definitely a secret. It is a surprise. The timing, like you mentioned, is interesting because, you know, this comes a day after, about a week after G20, a day after the Vishwakarma scheme that got launched. Prime Minister Modi right now briefing the media saying that whatever bills get introduced in the parliament in this short session should be debated in all earnest by both sides, and all of them are development oriented. All of these bills are going to have one singular focus of making India a developed country by 2047. So I understand there is going to be there are certain usual suspects, right? So I think the bill around women is likely to be tabled in the parliament. There is likely to be a bill around the post office reforms. There could be a bill maybe pertaining to press and publications registration. There could be a bill around the election commissioner. So we don't know actually if all of these will make it, how many more or which of these get subtracted. But I think the next 5 days are going to be interesting, and of course we
and let's
are
not
in the
forget
middle of election
renaming
season.
of India to Bharat, perhaps, if that resolution could be tabled
Absolutely,
in the
I think
Parliament.
top of mind. That is something that could see a lot of debate, and yeah, I mean, we are in the thick of election season. I think pretty much every time Prime Minister Modi takes to any podium, whether a national or a global one, there is this underlying election fervor that one can sense.
Absolutely.
And let's see how these remaining 5 days pan out.
We will have to, of course, see how these remaining 5 days pan out. But the day has started with the first session of Parliament. The special session is going to commence very, very shortly at about 11 o'clock. We are given to understand Prime Minister Modi will be in fact first to speak in Lok Sabha. So we'll bring you all those details here. But let's shift to perhaps a very important scheme policy that was launched by Prime Minister yesterday. It was the day of Vishwakarma Jayanti. Prime Minister briefly alluded to how it's going to be helpful to artisans, craftsmen of India, perhaps in a move to make them self-reliant. What's the scheme all about?
So, Shweta, the Vishwakarma scheme, Vishwakarma is what? Vishwakarma is tools, right? Tools pertain to artisans. So, Vishwakarma scheme launched by Prime Minister Modi yesterday at Dwarka at the inauguration of the Yashobhumi, the largest sort of, exposition center in the convention center in the world, not just in India.
Absolutely. But what a grand center. I hope we can pull up some visuals here. What a grand center like that.
And we also had Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman speaking at that very venue. Now, what is this Vishwakarma scheme all about? Primarily, this Vishwakarma scheme is about empowering artisans, and these artisans will be empowered using an outlay of 13,000 crore rupees. Now, what does this 13,000 crore rupee dole, if I can call it that, mean for the artisans? It means that they could avail a soft loan of up to 3 lakh rupees in 2 tranches. So a 1 lakh rupee loan would be readily made available to artisans, and if they're able to repay that loan with a very, very small interest rate of 5%, and that is a discount, a subsidy of 8% offered by the government. So at a 5% interest rate, if they're able to pay this 1 lakh rupees of loan or repay this 1 lakh rupees of loan to the government, they become eligible to avail another 2 lakh rupees of loan. So this makes the total corpus available to artisans of about 3 lakh rupees, which they can then use to produce the goods that they specialize in. Now, linked to this are also certain other elements. For example, there is going to be skill development and training, which is going to be essential part of this, Vishwakarma scheme, which means there is going to be a 5-day skill enhancement, skill training session offered by the government or various state governments. The outlay is all by the center, but I think the involvement of state governments is going to be paramount here. So a 5-day skilling program where these artisans also get paid about 500 rupees per day. So that's an additional 2,500 rupees going to anyone who enrolls for this training session, and add to that another 15,000 rupees, which strangely the government is calling it a toolkit, but 15,000 rupees to allow these artisans to buy tools which are required for their art and craft, a one-time expense up to about 15,000 rupees. Now, as I read it, Shweta, this is again, just ahead of elections, targeting specifically the SC, ST, OBC
the
bucket,
marginalized
section of society. Finance Minister's address also mentioned that this is a tool towards women empowerment. We know for a fact that there are enough and more women, employed in, let's say, the sari business or in the printing business, right? Or even the Khurja pottery, which is very, very central to Uttar Pradesh, has a lot of women folk contributing to work. So I think SC, ST, OBC, women, other weaker sections of society, not saying women are, but other weaker section of society, all of them sort of, come into this ambit to get a 13,000 crore rupee outlay, which should make them more competitive and be able to not just produce, their art and craft, but also the scheme should expose them to certain digital marketing training, branding, help, etc., which can make these products even more market friendly than they are right now.
All right, and that, of course, those are the details of the scheme. On your screens are visuals of Yashobhumi, the convention center, where all those grand announcements were in fact made. We also had Finance Minister speaking on how Vishwakarma scheme is perhaps going to be extremely helpful for women. Let's quickly listen into what the Finance Minister said.
In our country, Vishwakarma is considered to be the person who created everything around us. He's the master craftsman. He's the one who gives skills of all kinds to our people. And that is why Vishwakarma Jayanti is a very important day which stands for those skills with which our economy in small groups at the panchayat level, at the town level, have all had self-sufficiency. We had our own blacksmiths who made things out of iron and metal. We had our own jewelers who made our jewels. We had our own potters who made our pots and household equipments. We had our own silver and other workers. And for those of us who live next to a river or to a seashore, even fish nets were made by these able, nimble hands. So these crafted, well-skilled people lived around us, with us, along with us. And they actually made our economy very self-sufficient and very productive. That is why even 500 years ago, India could be.
All right. So, Finance Minister there, of course, talking about self-reliance when it comes to our craftsmen, people who actually make products with their hand. That is what Vishwakarma is about. But another interesting policy which is in line with Vishwakarma and perhaps hoping to promote craftsmanship is one district, one product, to support perhaps, people who are known to be traditional craftsmen or known to be traditionally good at doing something, and to keep supporting them to do that thing, to reach that end product
very
and goal.
True, Shweta. So ODOP, I think a very interesting concept. This was initiated by Yogi Adityanath government in Uttar Pradesh in his first term, and I was one of the early journalists who had covered this scheme back then. I think the idea is very simple, that every district in India given its diversity and the sort of varied skills that Indians possess, every district is given one certain specialization, and then that district is empowered to focus and create more and more craftspeople around that particular scheme. I mean, to give you an example, let's say you go to UK and you studied there. The Scotch is readily available and made legally only in Scotland. So the term Scotch is pretty much, directly relatable with Scotland. Similarly, you go to France and you go to a district called Champagne. That is what makes champagne. But India being, sorry, I'm giving only alcohol examples. That's all that's coming into my mind right now. But I'll give
an example of Moradabad, known for its carpet.
Moradabad, Moradabad actually known for its brassware.
Brassware,
right.
And yes.
So the idea being that you actually empower every district and you brand every district to produce very, very authentic craftsmanship, craftware from that particular district, and then that becomes geo-tagged, that becomes authentic, and that then gets taken on to national as well as global levels. So ODOP as a concept is great. Now I think what the government wants to do with ODOP is that its own self-made Atmanirbhar competitor to Flipkart and Amazon, which is the government e-marketplace, GEM, which has buyers right now only from government departments and PSUs. I think through this ODOP scheme, linked perhaps to this Vishwakarma scheme, the government wants these specialized products, the woodware from Saharanpur or Khurja pottery or silkware, or the things which are very, very traditional, artisan, specific to certain regions, brand them, authenticate them, geotag them, promote them, get them on the GEM platform first for at least PSUs and government departments to buy corporate gifting ahead of Diwali, etc., and get them to sort of become brands unto themselves.
All right, and that is very interesting and a very interesting way to promote self-reliance. Bhadohi is the carpet district and not Moradabad, but an example of where, as to what states, what cities, districts that you promote for what they're known for, their specialization. I think that is the end goal here, and Prime Minister launching that Vishwakarma scheme is perhaps going to help all those craftsmen in long run to come. But moving forward and moving a slightly different pathway from Vishwakarma to a very interesting story that is coming in by the way of SBI, one of the largest banks, the public sector banks in India, is now going to turn up at your doorstep if you're not paying loans, not perhaps going to barrage you with a set of questions, but first going to offer you chocolates.
Okay. I think you'll all remember the movie dialogue, life is like a box of chocolates and you don't know what you're going to get. So this time, that part is personified. You don't know what you're going to get. You're going to get a reminder from the bank that you have not paid, you're defaulted on your payment, or your payment is just around the corner, please pay up, and here's a box of chocolates, just so that it makes you feel a little lighter about the whole thing.
No, but it's more than that. It is to perhaps show that banks are getting more friendly towards not just disbursing of loan, because retail loan is one of the largest component of SBI's loan book at this point. So you want to make your customers feel happy, and you also don't want to barrage them with questions. As I said, don't intimidate them and not make their lives difficult.
So I think, Shweta, this is Amit gave us one example. I think the example that comes to my mind is a more sort of Indian film Munna Bhai, the second part where it is Gandhigiri versus Gundagiri, right? So I think SBI, what SBI is trying to do, of course, I mean, it's a pretty sweet gesture on the looks of it, but primarily it is not for the defaulters, but it is for those who are likely to default. So I think you are at the brink, looking at your transaction history, looking at your EMI churn, looking at perhaps, you refusing to answer calls or honor dues that accrue to you. It's basically a preemptive step which SBI is taking, wherein you get a likelihood that so-and-so is going to perhaps default in the future. Let's just go check on him and perhaps make the gesture sweet, carrying a box of chocolates.
Come to think of it, when I was reading this news item in the morning, it gets very difficult to assess someone's ability to pay or not pay. So I'm not sure how that is going to be arrived at, Amit.
Yeah. So the lending loan book of SBI itself increased over 16.5% in June this year to 12 lakh, over 12 lakh crore. It stands at over 33 lakh crores year on year. So it is increasing, and with increasing interest rates, it has been found by this bank that delinquency rates are also on the rise. And so these people have a data banks of prior defaulters. So it is like Karthik said, to preempt them from defaulting again, the bank knows who amongst their customers are likely to default. So this box of chocolates is only for those people.
All right, I'm not sure if people are going to like seeing bank officials turning up at their doorstep at all, for that matter.
That's because these people don't take calls.
Okay, I mean, these people, I mean, we don't know who the people are, but...
I mean, see, bank has got enough and more records, right? Your salary has stopped coming. You have a home loan. You can correlate and you can figure out that, there is a possibility 3 months, 4 months later, this guy might default. So let me make a visit to his home. And this is something that even RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das recently had said.
No, but hang on, Karthik, I just, want, for the sake of clarification, can a bank look into your existing financials in order to check your repayment capacity? Is that even legal?
I don't know if that is legal or not, but I'm saying there is enough and more artificial intelligence already at play, enough data crunching at play, where they may not physically go into your payslip or into your bank statement, but there could be some triggers that could appear on the bank's dashboards which tell you that your sources of income have reduced while your liabilities are the same. So there would be these dashboards for every customer, for every region, for every bank available, where then when you drill deep, you understand that perhaps there could be this individual who could be facing some sort of a financial distress, and a visit to check on that person and try and renegotiate maybe the terms of the loan, extend the EMI. If you remember, RBI had also recently come out with these guidelines, new guidelines for home loans specifically, that every time there is a change of rate, you need not adjust the tenure. Maybe there is somebody who wants to adjust the EMI. So you make a visit to the person's home and you understand the financial situation, the possible distress, and try and either recraft the loan or find other options where the default does not become a default. It could become a moratorium perhaps. So I think these are, and to make that visit maybe, a little more friendly, a box of chocolates could be one of the options.
Interesting reforms. I think about time to perhaps sit down with people you've lended money to, not just only at the time of trying to get that money back, but also try to renegotiate with them terms of loan, the tenure, and not harass them towards the end of it. But I think interesting story that is coming in by the way of SBI. But with that, we've run out of time here on this bulletin. Thank you very much for watching.
BrahMos. Stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The Warship Killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
ChatGPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a newsroom with anchors, researchers and scriptwriters, graphic artists, producers, video editors, camera crew. But does a newsroom really need them today?
All of us have to think about unique and distinctive value addition that cannot be automated or repeated or replaced by a machine.
ChatGPT may kill many companies. A human has to be in the loop with an ability to control this.
Dark Side of the Boom. Streaming now.
Akshay Kumar makes his Marathi film debut in Mahesh Manjrekar's Vedat Marathi Veer Daudale Sa. What's inspired Khiladi Kumar to foray into new terrain? Playing iconic Maratha king Shivaji Maharaj, he's jumping on a bandwagon that spells magic on the box office. Why are filmmakers in a rush to chronicle the life and times of Shivaji Maharaj?
Why do we feel the hunger, the need? Why are we compelled to make a film on Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj? And that too so many films. For a simple reason, he was the people's king. So